In 1933, a nickel could buy your whole family dinner. Not a snack. Dinner. My grandmother fed 6 kids on what most people today scrape straight into the trash. These weren't recipes written in cookbooks. They were survival, passed mouth to mouth across kitchen tables during the hardest years this country ever lived through. Number 14 on this list sounds like something a child made up, yet families swore it carried them through the winter of 1934. And number 3? Doctors today are quietly admitting our grandparents had it right all along. Every one of these meals took 5 minutes or less, cost pennies, and filled empty bellies when there was nothing else in the house. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because this is the food a whole generation refused to forget. Let's count down 25 forgotten poor man's meals that Depression seniors still make today. Number 25. Ketchup soup. When the cupboard was bare and payday was still 4 days off, your great-grandmother reached for the one thing every kitchen still had, a bottle of ketchup. She'd squeeze a generous glug into a mug, pour boiling water over it, stir, and crumble a few broken saltines on top. In under 2 minutes, she had something hot, red, and vaguely tomato-flavored to put in front of hungry children. A bottle of ketchup cost around a dime in 1934 and stretched across weeks of these thin, warming bowls. Restaurants of the era unknowingly kept the tradition alive, setting out free hot water and ketchup, so a man with no money could still sit at the counter with dignity and something warm in his stomach. It wasn't much, but on a January night with the wind rattling the windows, hot was everything. Number 24. The onion sandwich. 2 slices of white bread, a smear of whatever fat was on hand, and a thick slab of raw onions sprinkled with salt. That was supper for millions. Onions were among the cheapest things a family could buy, a few cents for a whole sack, and they kept for months in a cool cellar without spoiling. Your grandfather would slice the onion paper thin if he was feeling fancy, thick as a steak if he was truly hungry. The bite made your eyes water and your nose run, but it filled you up, and it tasted like something. James Beard, one of America's greatest chefs, later swore the onion sandwich was one of the finest things a person could eat. He learned that not in a restaurant, but from a country that had nothing else to spread between 2 slices of bread. Number 23. Bread and lard with salt. Before butter was something you took for granted, there was lard, the rendered pork fat saved in a coffee can on the back of the stove. Your great-grandmother would spread it thick across a slice of bread, crack black pepper and a pinch of salt over the top, and hand it to a child heading out the door. That was breakfast. That was lunch. Lard cost a fraction of butter and carried the faint, savory memory of every piece of bacon and sausage the family had cooked that month. It stuck to your ribs in a way nothing today quite does. City folks looked down on it, but the families eating it knew a plain truth, that a working body needs fat to keep going, and fat was the one thing a hog gave you cheap. Number 22. Sardines on saltines. A flat tin of sardines cost a nickel and packed more protein than a family could get any other way for the money. Your grandfather would peel back the lid, lay the little silver fish across a row of saltine crackers, and press another cracker on top. The oil from the tin soaked into the crackers, and nothing was wasted. He'd tip the last of that oil right onto the bread. Sardines needed no refrigerator, no cooking, no fire. A man could carry a tin in his coat pocket to the rail yard or the factory line and have a full meal on his 15-minute break. It was salty, oily, and strong, and to a body starved for protein, it tasted like a feast pulled straight from the sea for the price of a streetcar fare. Number 21. Crackers crumbled in milk. This one was so simple that folks are almost embarrassed to admit they loved it. A handful of saltines broken into a bowl, cold milk poured over the top, a shake of salt and pepper, and you ate it with a spoon before the crackers turned to mush. Your grandmother made it for herself late at night when the children were asleep and there was nothing left to cook. The crackers swelled and softened, the milk turned faintly savory, and for a few cents it was warm comfort in a cold house. Some families ate it hot, some cold, some with a pat of butter melting into the middle. It filled the gap between hunger and sleep, and old-timers still make it today, spoon in hand, remembering a kitchen lit by a single bulb. Number 20. Molasses on biscuits. Sweetness was a luxury during the Depression, and sugar cost more than most families could spare. So they reached for blackstrap molasses, thick and dark and cheap, a byproduct of sugar refining that sold for pennies a jar. Your great-grandmother would split a leftover biscuit, drizzle that dark syrup across it, and hand it over as the only dessert a child might see all week. Molasses carried a deep, almost bitter sweetness, and it was loaded with iron and minerals that kept growing bodies healthy without anyone knowing why. Doctors of the day even prescribed it. A spoonful mixed into warm water became a poor family's tonic. That sticky sweetness on a warm biscuit was the taste of a treat, proof that even in the leanest years, a mother could still find a way to give her children something to smile about. Number 19. Apple butter on bread. Every fall, families would haul in bruised, windfall apples, the ones too damaged to sell, and cook them down for hours in a big copper kettle until they turned into thick, spiced, spreadable apple butter. No sugar needed if the apples were sweet enough. Your grandmother would spread it dark and thick across a slice of bread, and that was a whole meal for a walking child. A single afternoon of stirring produced enough jars to last the entire winter, all from fruit that cost nothing but the labor of picking it up off the ground. The whole house smelled of cinnamon and cooked apples for days. That deep amber spread stretched a free harvest into months of breakfasts, and to this day the seniors who grew up on it will tell you nothing from a supermarket jar comes close. Number 18. Cinnamon toast. Here's where a nearly empty pantry produced something children begged for. A slice of bread, toasted over the open flame of a gas burner or in a hot skillet, spread with the thinnest scrape of butter, then sprinkled with sugar and a dusting of cinnamon. That was it. Your grandmother made it as a Sunday treat, and to a Depression child it was as good as any bakery in the world. The sugar melted into the warm butter. The cinnamon filled the kitchen, and for a few cents, a mother turned plain bread into something that felt like celebration. It took 2 minutes and cost almost nothing, but it carried the weight of love in hard times. Ask anyone who lived through it, and their eyes will light up. Cinnamon toast on a cold morning meant somebody cared enough to make things nice. Number 17. Sugar bread. First pattern break, and it's the one that shocks people most. When there was no cinnamon, no jam, no molasses, mothers simply buttered a slice of bread and sprinkled plain white sugar across the top. That was dessert. That was the whole treat. Sugar bread showed up at birthday parties and after supper when a family wanted to mark an occasion but had nothing else to offer. Your great-grandmother would press the sugar gently into the butter so it stuck, then cut it into little triangles to make it feel special. A 5-pound bag of sugar was carefully rationed, doled out grain by grain for exactly these moments. It sounds almost pitiful to modern ears, but to a child who had known real hunger, that crunch of sugar against soft buttered bread was pure joy, and it cost less than a penny a slice. Number 16. Peanut butter and crackers. Peanut butter became a Depression hero because it delivered something rare and precious: protein and fat in a jar that never went bad. Your grandfather spread it thick across saltines, sometimes pressing 2 together into a little sandwich, and carried them wherever the day took him. A jar cost around 15 cents and could feed a family for a week of quick meals. Some families thinned it with a little bacon grease to make it spread further and last longer. Children ate it after school, workers ate it on the job, and mothers relied on it when there was simply no time and no money to cook. That sticky, salty, filling bite kept a generation on its feet. It is still in every pantry in America today, but few remember it was once the difference between a working man eating and going without. Number 15. Fried bologna. A ring of bologna was one of the cheapest meats at the counter, and frying it turned something plain into something almost luxurious. Your grandmother would lay a thick slice in a hot skillet, and as it cooked, the edges would curl up and crisp and brown. She'd cut a little slit in the middle so it lay flat, then slide it onto bread with a smear of mustard. The whole house smelled like a diner. That crispy, salty round of fried bologna between two slices of white bread felt like a real meal, the kind that made a child feel taken care of. A pound of bologna cost a fraction of real ham or beef. Old-timers still fry it up today, and the smell alone can carry them straight back to a small kitchen and a cast iron pan 70 years gone. Number 14. Egg gravy over bread. This is the one that sounds made up, but it kept families alive through the worst winters. When there was no meat to make gravy from, mothers made gravy out of almost nothing. A little fat melted in the pan, a spoon of flour stirred into brown, then milk poured in and whisked until it thickened. Then the secret, a single beaten egg stirred through at the very end, cooking into soft golden ribbons that turned thin gravy into something rich and filling. Your great-grandmother ladled it steaming over torn pieces of bread or a split biscuit, and one egg could feed the whole family. It cost pennies. It took 5 minutes, and it delivered the warm, savory comfort of a Sunday dinner on a Tuesday when the cupboard held almost nothing at all. That was resourcefulness, born of pure necessity. Number 13. Tomato gravy over biscuits. In the South, when the milk ran out, gravy got made with canned tomatoes instead. Your grandmother would heat a little bacon grease, stir in flour, then pour in tomatoes she'd canned herself the summer before, simmering it all until it turned thick and tangy and deep red. Ladled hot over split biscuits, it was breakfast, lunch, or supper, whatever the moment demanded. A jar of home canned tomatoes cost nothing but a July afternoon of labor, and it turned a plate of plain biscuits into a meal with real flavor and warmth. The tang of the tomatoes cut through the richness of the fat and woke up the whole plate. Families who couldn't afford meat or milk could still put something hot, filling, and genuinely delicious in front of hungry children. And tomato gravy did exactly that every single time. Number 12. Sawmill gravy on toast. Also called milk gravy, this was the miracle that fed logging camps and farmhouses across the country. A little fat in the skillet, a spoonful of flour browned until it smelled nutty, then milk whisked in and simmered until thick and creamy, seasoned heavy with black pepper. Poured over toast or biscuits, it filled a working man for a whole morning of hard labor. The name came from the sawmill camps where cooks stretched a few cents of flour and milk into enough gravy to feed a whole crew of hungry men. Your great-grandmother could make a potful for the price of a single egg. That creamy, peppery blanket over crisp toast was the definition of sticking to your ribs, and to this day, breakfast diners charge good money for what was once the poorest meal in America. Number 11. Fried cornmeal mush. Second pattern break, and this one's a 2-day miracle. Cornmeal was among the cheapest foods a family could buy, sold in big cloth sacks for a few cents a pound. Your grandmother would boil it with water and salt into a thick porridge, eat some hot that night, then pour the rest into a loaf pan to set overnight in the cold pantry. The next morning she would slice that firm block, Fry the pieces in a little grease until golden and crisp on the outside, and serve them with molasses or a scrape of butter. One cheap bag of cornmeal became two completely different meals. The crisp fried edges against the soft cornmeal center, drizzled with dark syrup, was breakfast worth waking up for. Native families had been making it for centuries, and the Depression taught a whole new generation why it never disappeared. Number 10. Poor man's soup. When there was truly nothing, there was still soup. A potato, an onion, whatever scrap of anything the kitchen held, all of it chopped into a pot of water with salt and pepper, simmered until soft. That was dinner. Your great-grandmother could stretch a single potato across a whole family by making it into soup, the hot water filling bellies that the potato alone never could. Some families kept a soup pot going all week, adding whatever came in and never letting it empty, so the flavor deepened day after day. It cost almost nothing, and it was endlessly forgiving. A little more water and the same pot fed one more mouth. That steaming bowl, plain as it was, meant nobody went to bed hungry, and in the darkest years of the Depression, that was the whole point. Number 9. Egg in the hole. Also called gas house eggs, this was breakfast, lunch, and supper for children whose parents were out looking for work. Your grandmother would tear or cut a hole in the center of a slice of bread, lay it in a buttered skillet, and crack a single EGG right into the middle. As it cooked, the bread toasted golden while the egg set inside it, and you flipped the whole thing once to finish. One egg and one slice of bread, and a child had a hot, complete meal in 5 minutes. The little round of bread she'd cut from the middle got toasted alongside for dipping into the runny yolk. It cost pennies, and it delighted children who felt like they were eating something clever and special. Simple as it was, it turned two cheap ingredients into a small, warm act of love. Number 8. Scrambled eggs stretched thin. Eggs were precious, so mothers learned to make a few go a long way. Your great-grandmother would beat 2 or 3 eggs, then stir in crushed crackers, a splash of milk, even torn bits of bread, before scrambling the whole thing in the skillet. The addition swelled and soaked up the egg, turning enough for 2 people into enough for 5. Seasoned with salt and pepper and served hot, nobody at the table felt cheated. A dozen eggs was a real expense in 1933. So a mother who could turn 3 eggs into a meal for the whole family was performing quiet magic every morning. That skill of stretching the little you had to cover the many you loved was the true genius of Depression cooking. Those fluffy, filling, scrambled eggs proved that resourcefulness fed more people than abundance ever did. Number 7. Fried potatoes and onions. The smell of potatoes and onions frying in a cast-iron skillet was the smell of survival across America. Potatoes were among the cheapest and most filling foods a family could buy, a whole sack for a few cents, and an onion or 2 turned them into something with real flavor. Your grandmother would slice them thin, fry them in a little grease until the edges went crisp and brown, and the onions turned sweet and golden, and season them heavy with salt and pepper. That was a whole meal, and a satisfying one. Some families cracked an egg over the top if they had one to spare. The dish cost almost nothing, cooked in one pan, and filled everyone at the table. To this day, the seniors who lived through those years still make it, and one whiff can carry them straight back home. Number 6. Soup beans and cornbread. No meal fed more depression, families, than a pot of beans and a pan of cornbread. Dried navy or pinto beans cost pennies a pound and swelled to many times their size in the pot. Your great-grandmother would set them simmering with an onion and whatever scrap of fat or ham bone she could find, then bake a skillet of cornbread to crumble right into the bowl. The beans gave protein, the cornbread gave heft, and together they made a complete, nourishing meal for the whole family for the price of loose change. Neighbors traded a cup of beans for a cup of meal. Leftover beans became tomorrow's soup with a little added water. That humble bowl carried millions through the leanest years, and in much of the country, beans and cornbread is still Sunday supper, cooked exactly the way Grandma made it. Number 5. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Third pattern break, and this one has a name so blunt the soldiers who ate it could not say it on television. Dried, salted beef came cheap in little jars, and a small amount flavored a whole pan of gravy. Your grandmother would rinse the salt from the thin slices, tear them up, and stir them into that same creamy milk gravy, then ladle the whole thing steaming over toast. A few cents of dried beef fed the entire family a hot, hearty, protein-rich meal in minutes. The military adopted it to feed troops cheaply, and generations of servicemen grew up on it under a nickname we will politely leave alone. But long before the Army, it was a Depression mother's answer to putting meat on the table when there was barely any meat to be had. That salty, creamy comfort over crisp toast tasted like getting away with something. Number 4. The poor man's meal. This was the dish that defined the era, so beloved that a Depression survivor's videos making it went viral generations later. Your grandmother would dice potatoes and fry them in a skillet until they started to soften. Then add sliced onion and, when the family could afford it, a couple of hot dogs cut into coins. Everything cooked together until the potatoes crisped, the onions sweetened, and the hot dogs browned at the edges. A package of hot dogs cost a nickel or a dime and stretched across a whole pan full of potatoes. It was cheap, it was hot, it was filling, and it tasted like a real dinner rather than a sacrifice. That one skillet fed a family for pennies, and the seniors who grew up on it still make it today. Not out of poverty, but out of love for a meal that meant they made it through. Number 3. Milk toast. Here's where the doctors come in. Milk toast was so gentle and nourishing that physicians of the era actually prescribed it to the sick, the elderly, and children recovering from illness. Your great-grandmother would toast a slice of bread, tear it into a bowl, pour warm milk over the top, and finish it with a pat of butter and a sprinkle of sugar or salt. The warm milk softened the toast into something soothing and easy to eat, and it settled uneasy stomachs like nothing else. It cost almost nothing and took 3 minutes to make. Modern nutritionists now acknowledge what those old doctors knew by instinct, that warm milk and toast is genuinely easy to digest and comforting to a struggling body. A whole generation was nursed back to health on it, and to this day it remains the meal people crave when they feel low and far from home. Number 2. Dandelion greens with hot bacon dressing. The most surprising meal on this list grew free in every yard in America. When money ran out, families turned to the dandelions pushing up through the grass, entirely free for the picking. Your grandmother would gather the young, tender leaves, wash them, and wilt them in a skillet with a splash of vinegar and the last drippings of bacon grease. In 2 minutes, the bitter greens softened into something tangy, savory, and genuinely delicious. And here's the part science later confirmed, that those free weeds were packed with more vitamins than half the vegetables in the store. Iron, calcium, vitamin A, all of it growing for nothing in the yard. Depression families ate dandelion greens out of desperation and unknowingly fed themselves better than the wealthy. Foragers today pay good money for the very same greens Grandma pulled from the lawn for free. Number 1. Cornbread and buttermilk. And at the very top sits the meal that anchored more American tables than any other, so simple and so beloved that seniors still make it with tears in their eyes. Your great-grandmother would crumble a piece of leftover cornbread into a tall glass, pour cold buttermilk over it, and eat it with a spoon on the back porch after a long day. That was supper. Cornmeal and buttermilk were about the cheapest things a Southern family could keep, and together they made something cool, filling, tangy, and deeply satisfying. It used up the day-old cornbread that would otherwise go to waste and turned it into a complete meal. Nothing was thrown away, nothing was fancy, and yet nothing tasted more like home. For the generation that survived the Great Depression, cornbread and buttermilk wasn't poverty food. It was comfort itself, a taste of endurance passed down through hard years and never, ever forgotten. Here's my challenge to you. Try one of these this week. Just one. The fried cornmeal mush, the poor man's meal, the cinnamon toast, or a cold glass of cornbread and buttermilk like your grandparents made. Then come back and tell me in the comments if you understand now why they never let these meals go. Because these weren't just cheap dinners. They were proof that a family with almost nothing could still gather at a table, fill every plate, and find warmth in the hardest years this country ever knew. Your grandparents knew. Now you know too.